Amen. This morning, Sister Effie did a presentation on half right, half wrong. And part of that discussion is whether or not the study of 2014 was correct or not. And the assertion was made that it was half right and that it was half wrong, which she disagrees with, if I got that correct? Yeah. So in the presentation she said as a fact 2014 is the Sunday law, and most people I think agreed with that, because she kind of asked it, do we all agree, and nearly everybody said yes. So I then asked when she sat down and I got up, why is 2014 a Sunday law? There was nothing about Sunday that was mentioned in the year, and there was no laws that were enacted that were connected with Sunday sacredness, at least. And then she went on to explain that it's all to do with fractals. So we had a quick review of what fractals are, and it became apparent quite quickly that not all of us understood how fractals worked or what they were. So different people gave different examples of how fractals work, and we just want to tidy that up before we just move on. So Sister Effie gave an example of a square with lots of squares in it. So I'm just going to take that example and not do squares but do a triangle. Maybe it might be easier to conceptualize a triangle. So here's a triangle, and I'm going to put another triangle inside it like that. So you can see that this triangle is an identical replica of the other triangle. It's just flipped around slightly. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, so that's a model of or an example of a fractal. So we had examples of fractals, or definitions I should say, and when we looked at what those definitions were, what we saw was this concept. People use different words. I think the word that was used was zoom, or to focus in. And when you start thinking about it from that perspective, what you see is, from a distance you can't see things, and as you get closer you do see things. And the things that you see are different. They're not the same thing. Even in nature, when you go close to something, what you actually see is not the same thing. It's often something different, or at least a part of that. But then we saw the second bit of fractals that actually make them fractals is when you go in and you see this thing that's different, it has properties or characteristics that are the same, or we could say similar. So it's those two parts to fractals. You can't see it at a distance. When you get closer you can see it, and what you're seeing is not the same thing. It's something completely new, it's something completely different. This way mark here is completely different, but it has properties or characteristics that are the same as what you can see at that larger scale. So we've got a triangle, and we've got another triangle inside it. The triangle that's inside it is different, it's separate to the larger triangle. We can see that because it's two triangles. But there's something unusual about that triangle, if I could say it that way. And what's unusual is it has exactly the same characteristics or properties of the larger triangle. The ratios are all the same, if I can put it that way. Then what we could do is we've got this other triangle here, and look, we could do the same thing here. So there's a triangle there, and we've just replicated it. So this small triangle here, that one here, is identical in nature to this big one. We okay with that? And the reason we know that is because if we did this, we can do the exact same thing here, and it's just a scaled up version. It's identical. You see that? So you can begin to see how fractals are working. This smaller triangle is a replica of this one. You can demonstrate it because you can do the same thing to it. But we've got another triangle here, and this triangle is the same as this one, so we could do the same thing like this. And if you can do it here, we can do it here. And obviously you can now see what's going to happen next. This small triangle here is an identical replica of this big one, so we can just do that. And look, we've got another one here, so we can do that, and there's another one in here, so we can do that, and it goes on and on. So that's how fractals work. It's this repeating pattern that essentially never ends, and they're all identical. So you can see, if you were to just look up this way, how each one of these triangles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, got five triangles, are all identical, and they're just growing in scale. So if we'd started off not with this one, but it was bigger, you can just see how that pattern cascades up. If you're okay with that, I just want us to observe something else. So this is the outside shape. Okay, so it's a triangular shape, but this is now the floor plan of a room. Are we okay with that? It's a triangular room, and we're looking down from the top, and we want to tile this room. Put tiles on the floor. So here are the tiles that we're going to use. And how many tiles have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles. Each one of those tiles is identical in shape. What we probably would do would have some kind of coloration. So this would be a black one. So you'd get a pattern effect. So this is what Sister Ellie was talking about before when she had her square. She said the square is formed up of smaller squares. I'm just doing a triangle formed of smaller triangles. So once we start doing this, and perhaps we're going to use smaller tiles. So we've got a nice tiled effect, if you're okay with that. And maybe we didn't do that with that one, that was too big. So we did something like this. So we've got a nice tiled effect. And someone mentioned mosaics, and mosaics are normally just small tiles. If we have this pattern, there's a floor plan, and we're going to fill the floor plan or the floor with tiles. If each of the tiles are identical, and when you lay the tiles there are no gaps anywhere. Say for instance this wasn't a triangular room, say if it was an odd shaped room like this. So if you got this bit, all this would have been filled. This, depending on the shape of it, say if it looked like that, could we get one of these tiles which are all identical in size? If I'd drawn that accurately with the ruler, you'd see that they're all identical. Could we fill this gap here with these tiles without cutting them? We couldn't. So when you get an outline which has got, we'll call them tiles or shapes, inside which are all identical and you've got no gaps, it's got a unique name. It's not called fractals. Do we know what that name is when you start doing that? No? My spelling's probably not going to be correct. You can check if the spelling's correct. No, that's not that T. It's tessellations. So tessellations are repeating patterns of identical shapes that fill, in this case, a floor plan without any gaps. Is it double L or? Is it okay? Oh, they're checking still. Yeah?
It's an E after the S's.
Oh, that's an E. So it's E double L A. So tessellation. So tessellations are a form of fractals. So when Sister Effie had this room, she had a square, it's just a rectangle, and I'm going to tile it with black and white tiles. This is a fractal, but its technical name would be a tessellation, like a chessboard. So if you were to look at something that spoke about a floor that had been tiled, it would be a tessellation. Are we okay with that? We didn't discuss it in our last class, but I wanted just to add that perspective into our consideration of fractals. So if you see okay, I'm just going to repeat myself. Does that seem okay, Sister Juliana? Yeah? All of us have done this at school. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. In fact, you can get jigsaw puzzles that all the jigsaw pieces are identical in shape. They're really difficult ones to put together, but they're available. And if you went onto Google Images and look at tessellation, not fractal, look at tessellations, you'll see many pictures or patterns. So you can get ones that tessellations of like fish shapes. So they don't have to be geometric like this. They could be fishes or an elephant's face. You get quite intricate ones, and they can have these elephant faces with a trunk, and they can dovetail them all together, put them together so they tessellate. So they all join together without any gaps. So you can get some nice pictures. I don't know if you're looking at them at the moment. Yeah? So obviously these ones are easy to conceptualize, but you get some really interesting ones if you get a good artist and they make the patterns correct. I've seen elephant faces and fishes. What other ones can you see?
Seals, and my favorite one was a horseman.
Yeah, I mean quite complex ones, and they sort of turn them upside down, and the way they draw them, they all fit together. That
almost like an optical illusion.
it is, yes. It looks like that. Its name is tessellation, but it's really just a fractal. Because if you see those ones, I think the edges would have probably been cut if they've got a sort of a complex shape. So therefore, it's not technically a true tessellation because you've truncated some of those shapes. Because if they had them full, you would have an odd shape around the edges. But these geometric shapes are true tessellations because you're not cutting or truncating anything. Is everybody okay with that concept of fractals? It's something that it's a way that we don't look at fractals normally. Yeah? Anybody got any questions on that?
What's the difference between the tessellation and the fractal?
What's the difference between them? Okay, so remember we've been talking in class about parables. So what's the difference between natural and spiritual and juxtapositioning? They have subtle differences, but they have enough similarities that they are the same thing. They're just different ways of expressing the same concept. So that's what I'm saying here. Tessellations, I'm going to say always. I don't know if someone's got a dictionary definition of tessellation. They're shapes. I was going to call them geometric shapes. That may not be technically correct all the time, but they're shapes that fit together without any gaps. think jigsaw puzzle for tessellation. And each one of these smaller shapes should be a replica of the bigger one if it's done properly. Some of the ones that you've seen on your computers, on Google Images, like the horseman shapes, are not true tessellations because they've put them into a square room and they've had to cut those tiles, the edges of them, to make them fit. So it doesn't have all the exact properties of a true tessellation. True tessellation, you wouldn't have to do that. They all fit in properly. And you can see each one is a smaller part or an identical copy of the bigger one. That's why it's a fractal. So tessellations are these shapes, but we've not got shapes here, we've just got lines. So fractals come in different shapes and sizes. So I don't want to say that they're separate and distinct. They're the same thing, but it's just a different, maybe we could call it a different art form. Definition?
The process or art of tessellating a surface or the state of being tessellated, arrangement of shapes closely fitted together, especially of polygons in a repeated pattern without gaps or overlapping. Okay, so I was fairly close to that definition. There's no gaps, and they butt up properly. So if I had this shape here, and it was like this, you can see it's not a true tessellation because we've got gaps now. So it's an art form, so in an art form they'll just chop pieces off and don't worry about the edges because it's the pattern fit that they want to see. But true tessellation, it has to fit without any gaps properly, and for this to work we would have had this situation and you would have had gaps here. So it's not a true tessellation. And the thing is, when you do it, each one of these smaller components is an identical replica of the bigger. It's an identical shape. So we could not, in a triangular outline, we couldn't tessellate squares into that, could we? Because you'd have problems. You'd have to cut the smaller squares or you'd have gaps. That's why when Streffy did it, she put squares within squares, and I'm putting triangles within triangles to make it a true tessellation. And what's the difference between a tessellation and a fractal? No difference. It's just a different art form. You can do it on lines, you could do it, I think someone mentioned fern leaves. The whole of nature all works by tessellations. By the way, this whole idea of fractals, I don't know, it's a bit of trivia, I don't know if you know where the history comes from. Everybody heard of the company Boeing? Yeah? Boeing had made a new aircraft and they wanted to advertise it. So they wanted this aircraft to fly over some landscape, like, I wouldn't say a cartoon, but not real life. And so they got the airplane flying and they wanted to get the landscape obviously to flow nicely. They were really struggling how to do that effectively without using masses of computing power. So they tried to do it at first and it wasn't done very well. Then they discovered some research about fractals. And fractals are very simple mathematical problems because if it's repeating patterns and you think we'll substitute the word pattern for equation. So if you've got an equation, what do you just need to do? You just need to repeat it. And what are computers good at doing? Repeating very, very quickly. So if you can repeat an equation over and over again, can do it quickly, the refresh rate is extremely high, and therefore you can create mountain scenes, which are essentially all fractals, really, really easily. So that's how that's where it sort of first became useful. It was in a Boeing advertisement for one of their airplanes, and it wasn't the airplane itself, it was all the background scene. So I know we don't watch movies now, but when you see this often in a fight scene or something,
of a movie, it's real people fighting, then suddenly they do some crazy gymnastical act, you know, they've jumped from the floor to the ceiling, and without you realizing it, they go from real life to animation. And today it's done really well. It's not that easy to notice. And when they start doing that and you've got background scenes going on, all of that's done through tessellation to make those background scenes look really, really realistic. So if you do a mountain, it wouldn't be the way I draw mountains, just like a straight line, because no mountain is a straight line. And so what they do is, from a distance it looks like a straight line, but the closer you get, you know that mountains have got rugged edges. And in nature, those edges are all just repeating patterns. And you can compute that, and when you compute it, the edge of that mountain becomes extremely realistic. So that's how they do these animations in movies, using fractals. It's a really powerful technique. So we did that with fractals. Sister Daniela, over to you.
I was just going to show a picture of the fractal.
Go ahead.
Maybe I'll put it on
Yeah.
so that everyone can see what I was talking about.
You want to give a commentary while we're looking?
So in that, we get to see the small things we're talking about. They're called flores.
Okay.
They're small flowers, but so safe. Yeah. So we see a kind of, okay, first of all, from here you'll just see the circular middle with the circle. But then if you look into the circular, you'll see there's a pattern in there. It's like small circles. They almost look like spirals. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, so you've given a sunflower one, like you said. Is that what we've seen? Okay. Any questions on fractals? So Juliana, any questions? Still doesn't make sense?
No, it does. I like seeing it quite cool. Maybe I just need some time to.
I didn't hear the first bit that you said. You need to see it in a practical way.
How do we apply it in the line better?
No, I'll ask you a question. How we apply it in a line? Sister Wendy, how do we apply fractals in a line?
I'm still kind of trying to figure that out too. A little.
Okay, the same question you have.
Yeah. But I'm like her. I think I need a little more time to just sit down and really think about it.
Sister Denise?
Is it based on the conditions of a past event? You can, I guess, determine what a future event would be given the same conditions? I don't know if I explained that right, the way I'm thinking about it in my head.
I think you're correct, but for people who aren't sure about how fractals work, it's probably too complicated. I'm guessing, speaking on their behalf.
Then the only other picture I see is one big line and then maybe smaller lines within the big line. That doesn't really help either.
Sister Daniela?
How do you apply fractal in a line? So I will use the example up there, the 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the big 1, 2, 3. So I'm assuming in a line meaning the reform line. Is that what you know? Okay. So I'm just giving an example. It may not be the fact, but just to give an example. So let's say the 1 is 1798, the 2 is 1831, and the last one is 1833. Number 2 is 1833. So in between 1 and 2, between 1798 and 1831, there's a time period that has passed, of course, and there could be some events in between 1 and 2 that could relate to what happened in the big 1798, 1831, and 1833. So you can take so you can have 1798 to 1831 and be able to come up with events that are similar to what is in 1798 and 1831 and 1833. I don't know if that's
A question. Is the lines we did one day this week on the destruction of Israel and Judah a fractal? But with only 2 lines in it? Is that kind of an example? Because you have 7 over 4 and 7 over 4. And the destruction. I'm just trying to understand if that's how, kind of the concept of it.
Say that again.
How you have the destruction of Israel, and then the line with the destruction of Judah, and in both lines you have 7 over 4. And kind of.
Is that a fractal, Brother James?
Or does it has to be in the same time, same period of time, but just smaller, doesn't it?
Is that a fractal? So you can see that?
Yeah,
So-
that would have to be in the same line of time.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on fractals? What else were you tasked with, Sister Daniela?
What's that?
You had a picture, and what else did we ask you?
At 12, I'll be saying what the 2014 was in a nutshell.
Okay. Sister Effie? Your quote?
My quote was to show how the characteristics of the National Assembly law is or was depicted in 2014.
Okay.
So I'm reading from Great Controversy, page 608.
Two? One second. Has everybody got visible access to what we're reading? Or who does not? Do you want to snuggle up to us a bit, or you want to listen carefully? Okay? This is the reason why I ask. It's an important paragraph, and I'm going to ask some questions on it. The first half of the paragraph is the most important bit, but I'm not sure what Sister Effie's going to read. If she's going to read it all or not. But the first half particularly is the one that catches our attention. You go ahead, Sister Effie.
Okay, just a little thing before I read the first paragraph, so 608.1, in there we get some context in regards to what the storm is. So the sentence that helps me to come to that conclusion is, it says, as the defenders of truth refuse to honor the Sunday Sabbath, some of them will be thrust into prison, some will be exiled, some will be treated as slaves. So that gives me the context. Like that's what she's describing, the Sunday issue. So then the paragraph that I actually want to read is, as the storm approaches, a large class who have professed faith in the third angel's message, but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth, abandon their position and join the ranks of the opposition. By uniting with the world and partaking of the Spirit, they have come to view matters in nearly the same light. And when the test is brought, they are prepared to choose the easy popular side. Men of talent and pleasing address, who once rejoiced in the truth, employ their powers to deceive and mislead souls. They become the most bitter enemies of their former brethren. When Sabbath keepers are brought before the courts to answer for their faith, these apostates are the most efficient agents of Satan to misrepresent and accuse them, and by false reports and insinuations to stir up the rulers against them.
Everyone okay with that? Storm equals what? Storm equals what?
The storm equals the Sunday law.
Okay, so why are we here? Why are we reading this?
We're reading it because we want to identify the characteristics of what's happening in that period of time and see if we can see those in 2014.
What period of time?
The Sunday law period, the National Sunday law period.
Okay, and why are we here? Just you know what we wanted to do. Why did we even bother coming here? How did we get here?
To find out whether there was a Sunday law in 2014.
Okay, so what was my question to you? You had a statement, and I said, "Can you prove it?"
Yes.
What are you proving?
Okay, so I'm proving that based on I'm proving that the characteristic of seeing two classes at the National Sunday Law, where one class.
So we'll stop there. So the purpose of reading this is your proof that at the National Sunday Law, two groups are formed or demonstrated.
Yeah, demonstrated because
Two groups are demonstrated at the Sunday Law, and this is your proof text.
this is one witness, yes.
You got others?
Not right now.
Okay, so this is your proof, and this is at line 2 where it says 144. And what are you doing with this quote to show that 2014 is a Sunday law? How did you show 2014 was a Sunday law? What was the argument that you had?
Because the argument was that what happened at 2014, where the movement was divided, and some people believed that there was a Sunday law, and some didn't, and so they left. That's two groups.
Try and keep to not the details, but just an overview, generic. Okay? Okay, Sister Daniela, what's she saying? Whether you agree or not, what is she actually saying?
Yes,
Sorry?
I would agree.
Yeah, I'm not asking whether you agree or not. I'm saying, can you tell us what she's saying?
So she's saying that in 2014, there was two groups.
Not 2014. We're at number 2, line 144. Begin there.
Line 144?
The 144th line. Begin there.
That's what she said?
I believe so.
I thought she was just talking about, I didn't hear everything from 1989. Did you talk about it?
She didn't talk about 1989. No.
So she said that.
You don't know anything about that bottom line. The only way you know anything about that bottom line is...
By looking at it.
No, she just made that up.
Okay.
The way you know about the bottom line is
Looking at the upper line.
looking at the other line, not lines.
Line, I said the other line.
Okay, the 144 line. So that's where you have to start. So start there for us.
Oh, okay. So, in the 144 line, there's a Sunday law.
Sorry?
In the 144 line, there's a Sunday law at after 9/11. You see that?
There's a Sunday law.
Yes. So the events that happened at the Sunday law which
Are what?
are read,
Don't read it. Are what?
there's a distinction of two classes.
Okay, so there's 2 classes at the Sunday law.
Yes.
Okay?
So if you look at the bottom line, which lines with the Sunday law, 2014 lines with the Sunday law, and in 2014 in the movement, there was 2 classes that was in.
Okay?
Yes.
That's what she said?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes, actually.
Yep. Everybody okay with that? So we understand what the argument is. And she's given us a proof text for that. Yeah? You read the whole paragraph. Just direct us to the phrase or the sentence that is the proof.
Okay, so that would be the first part, the very first part.
First sentence, as?
As the storm approaches, a large class who have professed faith in the third angel's message, but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth, abandon their position and join the ranks of the opposition.
Okay, so if you're okay, which bit of that is pertinent, Sister Rachel?
I think she's comparing it the large class. They abandon their position during the ranks of the opposition.
Okay, so abandon their position. Some of the people abandon their position. Yep. So the abandonment of position means they're with you and now they're going to leave. So there's 2 groups. So that's at the Sunday law. And then you've come into our history and you said, from 1989, have we ever seen a group of people abandoning their position? And you said, yep, we saw that in 2014. So therefore, 2014 is the Sunday law. That's your logic? And Sister Daniela agrees with that logic?
I do. I could add to it.
Are you going to add to it?
I can.
Go ahead.
Um,
With this passage or another passage? Or?
From the passage.
So men of talent and pleasing address.
Which line are we on? No, not line here. Which line on the board?
The bottom one.
Can't be on the bottom one. Can't be on the bottom line.
Okay. Oh, you mean, okay.
Can't be on the...
Yes,
Which
what
line are we
we're
on?
reading is the second one.
We're on the second line.
Yeah, but what I'm going to explain is about the bottom.
That's fine. You can explain it in a minute, but we're not on the bottom line.
Right, we're in the middle of the line.
Okay, so we all, because we do that too often, we say this is talking about the bottom line and it's not. Okay, so we're on the middle line.
So it says, men of talent and pleasing address who once rejoiced in the truth employ their powers to deceive and mislead souls. So to me,
Just read a little bit louder. But don't reread it, but just carry on, but just a little bit louder.
carry on with explanation.
Well, yeah, whatever you were doing.
Okay. So, to me, what I see there is that these men were very influential. Were quite influential, and that's in the second line. We see in the second line what we're looking at. We see that the people, the men that we are talking that are being referred to here, they knew the truth. They probably taught it. They were quite influential to the Sabbath, like once before. So now they come out and they're the ones who lead others out of the faith or mislead souls. So to the bottom line.
One second. When you're paraphrasing or explaining, you don't have to add things to it to make your point strong.
Okay.
The strength of your point is in just paraphrasing what's there. You don't need to add to it. Because I notice you add to it and then you retract your addition because you realise maybe you're stretching it too far.
Right.
Yeah. So don't feel that you have to do that to reinforce your point.
Okay.
Carry on.
So in the last line, in 2014, there was, according to what I know, there was, or what I've heard,
A what?
many of the leaders, or what I've heard,
Yeah.
many of the leaders who are teaching, or the teachers, yes, many of the teachers left the movement at the same time, the same year, and so that's why I would parallel it with that, add to the piece that Effie had.
Okay. Sister Wendy, you okay with that? You don't know if you're okay or you don't know what they're talking about?
I'm not sure if I'm okay with it. I'm trying to figure it out.
You don't like what they're saying or you don't understand what they're saying?
I think I understand what they're saying, but I'm not sure if I agree with it.
Oh, good. So tell us what you don't agree on.
I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out how these lines go to work together. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Which bit? Look this way. Look this way.
He's not helping me. It's okay.
No, he's giving you comfort. We cannot allow that.
I'm trying to understand how this bottom line is a fractal of that one, of the next one.
Okay. So this is what I was worried about. That you wouldn't understand how that fractal worked. Someone wouldn't. So that's why we sort of looked at fractals. Okay. Let's go to this has got nothing to do with what we're studying. Let's go to the book of Esther. It's a bit of trivia to lighten things up. Esther chapter 1. Let's see. Oh, it's a lot. There's too many verses. So, who's got a study Bible or one that breaks up the chapters? So you've got one. Oh, good. So, how many parts is chapter 1 broken up into? Oh, you haven't got that. You got there? How many parts? Oh dear. Let me check in my Bible. I've only got 2 on my computer.
Sorry, while we're at that, if I can just ask a quick question. Regarding what you just said, study Bible. What kind of Bible are study Bibles? Because there are a lot of Bibles out there, King James, that are study
Oh, it's just called this one, the Ellen White Study Bible. It doesn't even say Ellen White on it. It's the Ellen White Study Bible, that's the one I was thinking of.
And you can open it up and then break it out into how you're asking.
You got the Ellen White Study Bible? Just show him.
Just looked at my Bible. I believe.
Oh, broken. Oh, okay. So it's broken up into different sections.
Yeah. Have you got eSword on your computer?
I do, yeah.
Have you got any subtitles?
Let's see.
No, you just look on your, does you have subtitles? Esther 1:1, is there a subtitle above that?
Yeah, there is.
It says,
The King's Banquets.
okay, so you have it. You haven't got the exact same one. What's your one? What's Esther 1:1 say?
The official feast of 180 days.
Okay, and it says the King's Banquets. So it's got feast in your Bible, and it says banquets in yours.
It says Esther named Queen of Persia also.
So that's, if you check that, that's for 2 chapters, 1:1 to 2:20. Just this little subsection, verses 1 to 4, the official feast of 180 days. Your one doesn't break it down that fine. Your one goes from, yours, Brother David's, goes from 1 to 9.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1 to 9 in Sister Wendy's Bible says the 180-day feast, and then verse 5 says,
The public feast of 7 days.
so you've got 180-day feast, a 7-day feast in 9 verses, and it ends where? At verse 9. Ends in verse 9, and your one ends in verse 9. So all her one has different to yours is that in verses 1 to 9 they're going to make a demarcation between the 2 feasts. In your one it says banquets in the plural, and her one says 180-day banquet, 7-day banquet, and yours just doesn't break it down. It just tells you not to do that.
Are these completely trustworthy?
Okay, I'm not sure how you want to define completely trustworthy.
If you're new to Bible study, can you really, you can trust what it's saying?
I would say they're trustworthy, taking the word completely out, because it's human. I mean, it's human devising, so I don't know if it's completely, but it's trustworthy. I rely upon them. Not that you do anything with them particularly, but they do. If you're scanning through things,
Set up an idea
yeah,
of what you're about to read.
yeah. So for that purpose, when you're scanning, you want to get some context. It's pretty good, especially because the King James is hard to read sometimes. You go through the verses, you get lost in direction. If we were reading a more contemporary version, which is much easier on the mind, you probably wouldn't need them. You'd get the context really easily. Okay, so we'll do verses 1 to 9. Everybody okay? We're in verses 1 to 9. And are you okay with tessellations, Sister Juliana? Yeah? Good guess. And fractals? Not so good a guess.
I didn't have time.
Okay, I'm happy with that. So we're all going to quickly read verses 1 to 9, all of us, individually, quietly. Try and do it quickly. And what I want you to do is tell us where you see fractals. So I've given the clue, verses 1 to 9. See if you can find fractals in verses 1 to 9. If you come up with the wrong answer, so all of us are going to look for it, but I want you to tell us which the verse, and then we'll compare notes. Everybody okay what they're doing? Verses 1 to 9. I've been fair, I've not said go to the whole chapter, because it's a bit of a task. It's 22 verses and we might get lost, so I've contained it. It's in verses 1 to 9, so it's not a trick question. I don't ask trick questions. I don't ask trick questions. No, I don't do that. Okay, so go ahead. If you can multitask, listen what I'm going to say, a bit of commentary, a bit of history, a bit of testimony if you like. If you can't, ignore what I'm saying. So fractals come up into our movement, I don't know, maybe 2015, 2016. Are you reading? You've got to read because you're the one who's on the hotspot. If you can't multitask, ignore me. And you've got to know that all the world loves fractals. Us hardcore Christians and also those New Age folks, our friends who are in the New Age movement. And they employ fractals to achieve a higher state of being. However they do that, I have no idea. And so fractals have got a very strong pedigree or history of being involved in the New Age movement. So when we started talking about fractals, people disagreed. People in our movement said, this is a New Age thing, we shouldn't be touching fractals. I don't think they realised that the virgin birth was also a New Age concept, as was the Godhead and many, many other things. Anyway, so, and they say, fractals aren't even in the Bible, can't find any fractals. So I was doing some studies and I thought, oh look, I found fractals in the Bible, and I think we've got primary facie evidence of fractals in the Bible, and it's somewhere in verses 1 to 9 of the book of Esther. And the reason why that's interesting, we'll say in a moment. That's what we expect, multitask.
I can't.
Ah,
Listen.
I'll be silent. If I could read Portuguese, I could answer. We'll go with, are you reading Portuguese? Yeah, you can, I'm guessing. Are you studying this, Brother Larry, with us? Yep, okay, so I'll ask you to either agree or disagree with Sister Juliana's answer. So she'll go first, you'll go second, if that's okay. Thank you. You fast read, Sister Catherine? You found the answer? You think? Oh, you know you have. Sister Denise? Found the answer?
I don't know if I found the answer.
A guess.
Yeah.
Good. Sister Rachel? She sounds confident. You gone through 1 to 9, no clues? You read verses 1 to 9 and you can't see it? No? Not even a hint? No? Brother Luke? Not Luke. Larry, who I'm talking about, sorry. Sorry?
Verse 6.
Verse 6, Sister Rachel? 6? Sister Effie? Okay, so no, you didn't find anything. Okay. Sister Catherine?
I was thinking, for one, and 1, 2, and 3, it's basically saying the same thing. It's saying, it says that Ahasuerus reigned from India to Ethiopia, so then you get the idea that he's king, and then in verse 2 it says that he's king, basically, that his palace is in Shushan, which is a little more detail on the matter. And then in the third verse, there's more detail, but it's still talking about the same thing.
Okay. Oh, that's far too complicated. It's far too complicated. Sister Denise?
I don't think I get it at all because everybody else answers. All I was there were 3 feasts in the palace within the timeline of his kingdom.
3 feasts?
One for the princes and nobles, one for the people, and then Vashti for one also.
Okay. And her one is concurrent with...
Huh?
Her one's concurrent with the other one.
It says in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus. So I'm assuming that it's the same house.
Yeah, so it's happening at the same time. Okay, so I don't know what other people thought. I agree with Brother Larry. Verse 6. Why verse 6? Where do you see fractals in verse 6?
Where it says in the first part, where were white, green, and blue, hanging, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings, pillars of marble.
And Sister Rachel, where did you see it?
I saw it in all that description of the palace. So you've got the palace, and then you see what's in the palace.
Okay, Sister Denise?
Is it in the pavement, marble, the floor?
That's where I saw it. In the pavement. It seemed to be the exact story that we that Sister Effie gave us right at the very beginning. You have a floor, and in this floor you've got tiles of red, blue, white, black and marble. And if you go back to Persian culture and Persian artwork, I don't know if you've ever seen Persian floors and how they're done. They're these beautiful mosaics which are all repeating patterns, which is the very definition of fractals. Okay, so that was our bit of trivia. And let's go back to business.
The other part you mentioned was not fractals.
I don't think there's enough information in all the other ones. I don't think there's enough information. The one that has the purest definition of what tessellations are or fractals is this pavement or floor which has been tiled. You might have to know a little bit about Persian culture, but that to me is a clear reference back to fractals. But you have to understand that tessellations and fractals are the same thing, because these floors have been tessellated, these repeating patterns. So we're asking ourselves about how you get from that line 2 to line 3. How is that fractal created? Is that what you're saying. Sister Ruth, you understand how fractals work? Yeah? Could you come up and explain? Oh, I think you might need the board to come and do it. You can do it from there?
Like a definition?
Not a definition. No, I want you to show us how we get from the 144,000 line to our line, because there's more than one person who doesn't understand how that's working properly. So I think you need to come and do it on the board, because they won't get it from sitting down. So it's not just a simple definition that we're working with. Erase what you need to erase off the board. So, what do you need, Sister Wendy? What do you need Sister Ruth to do for you?
I'm trying to understand exactly how we see that. See, what I think is we're taking from 9/11 to Sunday law and blowing it up, right? In the next line. Is that right or not?
So she'll answer in a second when she does it. So she give her all the either questions that you have or the things that you think you understand.
I see that 2014 is Sunday law. But if we're taking that out of that, how does 2019 not line up with Sunday law? Does that make sense? The question?
Does that make sense?
I don't know how to answer that one.
Okay, so
Sorry, can you say the question again, please?
If we're taking 9/11 to Sunday law out of that line and opening it up,
Okay.
how does Sunday law not match up with 2019?
rather than 2014. Okay. If you can't answer that question directly, maybe it'll come out in your explanation, or maybe it won't. So you go ahead and explain.
So from my understanding is that just from the definition of fractals, which is like the basic unit of the big line, so then this is like the basic unit of this line, which has a similar pattern to this. In other words, this is a pattern repeating in a smaller scale, so we're able to get more information. So in that sense now we see what happens in the Sunday law here, the characteristics of this big pattern, which is this, then we see those characteristics in 2014, which would be that.
That helps. I think I figured out. Okay, so that bottom line isn't really out of this line, right? It's really out of, yes it is too. It has to be. It's out of the 144,000 line.
Yeah. That's my understanding.
I see it, but I just can't tell you how it works. I mean, I can see that it works, but I can't tell you how it works.
Anything else? No? Thank you. Sister Catherine, you understand? Do you understand how fractals work? You must do. You did all that verse 1 to 3. Sorry?
I don't know how to explain it.
Oh, you just don't want to get up.
No, I really don't know how to explain it.
David,
Yes.
can you explain it?
Okay, so
Simply. Simply.
can I give an example?
If it helps.
Can I give an analogy?
If it helps, yeah.
Okay. So say we're going from Minnesota to Toronto.
If it doesn't work, just tell him to stop, because this is for you.
He did this before, and I understand the stagger, but these aren't staggered. These are on top of each other.
So I'm going to add to what I told you.
Okay.
Okay, so you understood the staggering. So let's deal with the time. So say it takes you, it's supposed to take 1 hour to go from Minnesota to Toronto. And you have the 5 things, which I mentioned in the previous example. You get gas, you need to go to the washroom, you need to change your, you need to take a break, you need to make a phone call. But you have 1 hour to do all of that. And so you do actually get that all done within the 1 hour. But then now, your husband has 30 minutes to travel from Minnesota to Toronto. Remember, he has to do all 5 things in that same amount of time. So let's say if you stopped to get gas, you have 1 hour. So at the 15-minute mark, let's say you made a phone call, you had 1 hour, so that's 15 minutes. That means you have 45 minutes left. But he has 30 minutes, so he can't be making the phone call at 15 minutes because he would have only 15 minutes left, and he'd need to fit the other 4 things. And it's not a perfect example, but the concept is that however, whatever you got done within the 1 hour, he has to get those same things also done within the 30 minutes.
I understand.
Where he chooses to do those 5 things is probably what the core of the question is, because it's like, okay, when does he know to get the gas? When does he know to stretch? So I think maybe that is what some of us might be struggling with.
But I see that they all have to fit in the same.
Let me just stop you there. Brother Douglas, were you listening to that?
No, I was drawing some lines.
Okay.
Is that the concept of why it's staggered? Because
There's no staggering here? We don't see any staggering? No?
But like in all the other things, I don't understand all the events, but from everything I've seen, every time I've seen someone do it, it's always been staggered. It's the first time I've seen it directly.
Okay. So we'll leave the staggering for the moment. So you weren't listening?
No, so I missed that, just that last one.
The Brother David said?
Brother David and then
Did you listen to most of what he said?
Brother David?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so you weren't listening to what he said. Quickly, Brother David.
Okay, so
He's going to listen this time.
Sister Wendy has to come from Minnesota to Toronto, and she has 1 hour to do it, and she has 6 things now to do. So she breaks it up into 10-minute intervals. So in 60 minutes, she's here, and Brother James has 30 minutes to do those same 6 things, and he has to get them all done within 30 minutes. So he decides to break his into 6 times 5 is 30. So he breaks his own things into 5-minute intervals. So if he doesn't do that, he won't be able to get all the things done. Maybe he could, but I'm just giving an example just to show the kind of pattern which is fractals. And so basically you got to do the same amount of things, but the timing would be off because what she's doing at the 30-minute mark for her would be different than what he'd be doing at the 30-minute mark for him, which is he's reached Toronto. Because he had 30 minutes to do it all, whereas she had 1 hour, so, so
Do you get that, Brother Douglas?
Yes.
Okay, my question to you is, what Brother David just described, is that the definition of a fractal? Because he's using it as an example of a fractal. So I'm asking you, is that the definition of a fractal? Is that a correct explanation of how fractals work? Just yes or no? Or I don't know, one of the 3.
I would say no.
Why?
From the bigger picture,
What's he doing wrong?
he's exacting that it has to be similar. Say, Brother James has officer with sister.
Okay, try not to give an example of why he's wrong. Just tell us why he's wrong.
Because
Not through an example.
okay.
Point out what he's done wrong if you don't agree.
At the fractal level, it can be different or similar.
But
but he has put it as similar.
You said it can be.
Huh?
You said it can be same or similar.
I think it can be at the fractal level. It can all be. They have to do 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. But it can be different depending. It can be I do 2 minutes here, 18 minutes here, 5 minutes there.
Okay, so that's what the difference is. Just the timing's different.
Yeah.
So if he adjusted, if he didn't say the timing, you'd agree then. He said 10, 10, 10, and then he said 5, 5, 5. If he had said 5, 7, 3, you would have been happy.
There's also the issue of the two of them, are they on the same line or it's two different lines?
I don't know. He said Minnesota to Toronto.
If they win Minnesota to Toronto, that means they're coming together, then it looks the same. But if someone is going fast and the other one is going second, then that's a fractal. And this one will arrive in 10 minutes, this one will arrive in 5 minutes. So now you have two different lines that look the same based on what
So now you're saying you agreed that what he said was a fractal?
my disagreement was with regards to
Just those little bits of timing?
yes,
Okay.
at the very fractal level, what they do to get here.
So he's going to change that. He's going to say 10, 10, 10, then he's going to say 5, 7, 3. You're happy now?
I think I would be really happy.
Okay, so now it's all good.
Yeah.
Brother James? Just yes or no? Sorry? Okay, so the reason why I'm asking the question is because we all, to some degree, think we understand how fractals work, except when we're put on the spot to explain them, and you see it's not that straightforward. It's not that easy. Okay? Anyone else got any comment? Sister Daniela? Yes or no? You agree that what he was describing was a fractal?
I could modify it a little bit.
That's fine, but do you agree with what he did?
In general, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Sister Effie?
I think I agree in general too.
Yes, that's fine. So, we've got this as our fractal. And what have we said? The properties of this fractal. In how many parts to begin with? The answer. How many? Not how many parts. How many parts is our answer going to be in? 2 parts. Answer 1. What about these new waymarks that we've found? What do you say about them? They are unique. Second part, they are okay. So we have to be careful what we mean by the word or the phrase "the same." Are they really the same? Are they really the same? Yes or no? They're not really the same, you say. Is 2014 Sunday? No, is it Sunday?
It is Sunday.
You can. There's no Sunday. Is there any law? No. So when we say Sunday law, is it the same as this one? No. So it's not the same when we start talking about the purest definition of the same. It's, oh, he's gone. He left us. Okay. I just don't want to do it without him. Because he'll come back and we'll say, "You're wrong." Say what? She left us. Okay, so fractals, definition of fractal. 2 steps. First one
Is unique.
and second.
The characteristics are the same.
Okay, so the characteristics are the same, or we might say similar. They're not identical, because this is not Sunday and this is not a law. If you're okay with that, Brother James?
Characteristics aren't identical, or
No, the characteristics, when we say the characteristics are the same or identical, I want us, however you want to express it, just so that we know they're not identical. They're not the same thing. Are we okay with that? So, the example as it was given was, you both begin where? In Minnesota, and you end in Toronto. Yeah? And the example is given, one does it in half the time as the other. Everybody's fine with that? Now, in this story here, we've got 2 lines, haven't we? We've got 1 line here, and we've got 1 line here. Everybody okay with that? There's 2 lines. Where does... No? You looked...
You count the 1, 2, 3s and the 1. Yes.
Yeah? So, this line, where does it end? It ends here. In real life. Where does this line end? Sorry?
It ends there.
It ends where?
Where the other one is.
Does
Where
it?
the other one ends.
It ends there?
Yeah.
No, it's... I've just drawn it.
Yes, it ends there, but in real life it ends.
No, in pretend life, it ends here.
Okay, and then
In real life,
it ends there. Okay, yes, sorry. I got that.
so these are not the same destination point. This was Sister Wendy. Where did she get to? Brother James never ever got to Toronto. It looked like Toronto, it felt like Toronto, it smelled like Toronto, but it was not Toronto he ever got to. Sorry?
Because it didn't take him the same amount of time.
Yeah, however we're going to explain it, they didn't get to the same place. She went to a city, and he went to the city. The cities looked the same, but they were not the same city. You okay with that, Brother David?
I see where.
I see where you're going, but so the premise is that given the amount of time, they will get to the place at the same time. So that was my premise.
I understand your premise.
I'm not arguing that the analogy I gave could be flawed, but I'm saying, just given the premise that, okay, how much ever time you will, so the end goal is to get to the cities. It's not so much the time. I mean, that is part of it, but so in my story, that's kind of...
You can't use a story that explains a principle or a model like fractals and say that they both arrive at the same place. They don't arrive at the same place. By definition, they wouldn't.
Okay, so I can maybe try to fix it? Because he was trying to do what I was going to do.
What I wanted us to all to see was where the example was flawed. Regardless of the timing of everything, it's flawed because we have to remember that they are not the same thing. They are uniquely different. And until we grapple with that and really internalize it, we will keep on coming and saying 2019, if you fail, you never have another opportunity, or probation closes for you. If you sin the next day, you're going to be in severe trouble because you're going to burn in the lake of fire. You attach all of this information because what are you saying? You're saying this is Toronto and this is Toronto, and it's not. This is not Toronto, it's a completely different place. Might pick up some characteristics of Toronto, might feel like Toronto, but it's not the same thing. Are you okay with that, Sister Wendy? Are you okay with that, Brother David?
No.
You're not?
No.
Do you agree that this waymark here is waymark number what?
No, where your finger is, it's 2.
Nope.
It's 2.
It's waymark number 2. You're making it waymark number? Sister Effie, what waymark is he making that? Number? He's making it this one. And it's not this one, it's this one. This waymark, which I've got a 3 dash, is this waymark. It can never be this one. And if this is Toronto, this could never be Toronto. You can pretend that it's Toronto. You might have the feel of Toronto. You could take a picture and say, did you go to Toronto? You say, it looks like it, but it wasn't. Because when you get this one and you stretch it out to here, it's not Toronto. It just feels like it in certain ways, like it's got a road and a building. But it doesn't have the same, I don't know, the coastline or the same shops. There are big differences between them, but they're similar characteristics. Let's pray. Have a think about it. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and thanks for your goodness and mercy. Lord, help us to grapple with fractals and how they work, how they operate, so that we might be able to divide your word correctly. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.